Hello, Shemai. It's Taylor, the co-host of the show. Quickly, before we start this episode, I'd like to give a little disclaimer that this podcast is independently hosted by Plaid Ifanc members and is not entirely representative of the party itself. Therefore, any views, opinions, or statements expressed during this podcast are entirely our own and not the party's, unless explicitly stated otherwise. So now the boring bits out the way, please do enjoy the episode. Hello, croeso, welcome to Lleisiau Plaid Ifanc with me, Taylor Reynolds, and Mr. Jack. So we are aiming to start this new podcast because every young man needs to have a podcast, but also because we feel like there's a space for a bit of more long-form content in the Plaid Cymru space, and also we just want to give an insight into how youth participation in politics happens and just our general feelings about the state of Wales heading into the Senedd elections. So yeah, I'm going to start off basically with me and Jack introducing ourselves. So what we're doing now in and outside of Plaid, and just a couple of fun introductory questions. So Jack, do you want to explain a little bit about yourself, what you do in Plaid Cymru and outside?
Yeah, so I'm Jack. I'm 20 from Tregaron, Ceredigion. I'm a student in university doing philosophy, and yeah, I joined Plaid Ifanc and help to do what I can there, which I think is all anybody can do, is do what you can where you can, helping sort of arrange events, doing leafleting, and I've been doing a bit of Plaid Ifanc GOG's TikTok page. For some reason, people want to listen to what I have to say at times, so lovely jubbly. But yeah, I'm been a member of Plaid Cymru now since I was 18 anyway, so what am I now? 23, so it's been a while.
Yeah, well, we've got a bit of a nice little difference between, we've got South Wales representation with me and North Wales representation with you. But you've been in Plaid a little bit longer than me. I only came into Plaid just for the general election in 2024. So any sort of stories about Plaid, a bit of lore about Plaid Ifanc, I think Jack will be your man for that compared to me. I've got a little bit less history in the party so far. But yeah, I'm Taylor. Obviously, I'm a student in politics in Swansea. I did study in London for 2 years, but I just love Wales so much that I thought I'd come back home. So yeah. So what brought you into Plaid originally? What was your moment that you started getting active in politics, and then what brought you to Plaid, Jack? I don't even know. I don't think.
Well, I think I was always destined to be a Welsh nationalist. My mum she was active in all sorts of campaigning in the 80s and the 90s. She campaigned for Cynnal Davies when he got in with Ceredigion and was a member. Well, I don't know if she was a member, but she was active with the Welsh language campaigning and things. So I think it was always sort of going to happen. Not that we were raised in a particularly political household either. It just sort of happened naturally. But yeah, when I was 14, 15, I got, think of it was a magical time to be alive. 18, Facebook,
Pre-COVID.
there was, yes, Welsh independence memes for Welsh nationalist teens and all these sort of Welsh independence meme pages popping off on Facebook. And I remember being in my canteen in school and my friend said, "Oh, look at this meme." And it was a meme from The Simpsons of the Union Jack on fire or something, and it said something like burning things that mean nothing to you, and I saw it and I just thought I could get into this, and yeah, just sort of started reading into Plaid and things, and I think I was more involved in independence and language campaigning before, but then I sort of gradually, especially as I went into university, I got more involved with Plaid Cymru and started leafleting and canvassing and stuff, and yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I think there's a good little family here in Plaid Cymru. We're really welcoming to everyone. And I think it does sound cringe and it does sound cliche, but we really are a little family. It's great.
Yeah, it is true though, because I feel like when I had my first job, when I went in there, they said, "Oh, we're like a little family." But I feel like that always turns out to be sort of a bad omen when it's a company telling you that. But within Polite, that is actually true, and I think as well, it's very it's always this. It's interesting that The Simpsons had such a great effect on you. It's brilliant. And also on the Welsh, on the language part, because I think we're both very passionate about the language. I will preface by saying we will be doing Welsh episodes, so we're going to be doing Welsh and English episodes, hopefully sort of one after another. But at the moment, we're figuring it out at the moment. But yeah, for me, I mean, I was around the same age, but obviously I was 14, 15 around the time of COVID in lockdown. And I think for me, social media similarly had a big effect on it, but I had to figure it out on my own sort of thing. I didn't have the sort of canteen thing that you had. My family aren't very political at all, or haven't been in the past, so I'm the first of my kind. But what happened with me, honestly, I think there was a big uproar in 2020, of course, with the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota, and with the whole woke uprising that we had. And I just sort of fell into it because I felt very passionate about social justice and just general woke things. It all seemed to sort of resonate with me quite well, and it still does today. But I think, I got more into politics then. I started reading like Marxist and communist literature. I don't think I really understood it. But I was definitely a big far lefty back then. I've probably calmed down a little bit now. But then when I went off to study in London, I studied politics. That's when I got into sort of more party politics. And the general election obviously was happening when Labour won the landslide. And I realised that Plaid were actually a proper serious party. I think there's a big sort of misconception, or there was, that Plaid were almost a single issue party in terms of the language, or that they'd never win, etc. And in my brain, I just never considered them. Interestingly, and I said this to Reen, little name drop, I mentioned this to the leader, Reen up your I said, the time I turned to Plaid Cymru was when he was on, I think it was Good Morning Britain, and he was getting questioned by Kate Garraway, and she was quite dismissive of him about HS2, and I thought he stood really strong for Wales. And so that's when it started, really. And I came back during the general election, and I saw Plaid members in Llanelli campaigning, and they welcomed me with open arms. I went up to them on the street and I said, I'd like to get involved. And since then, it's just been like a sort of a steady rise, really, in my participation. Now I do the socials for Plaid Ifanc and sort of try and campaign in Llanelli. And it's just become a very important aspect of my life, and hopefully we can continue the momentum going forward. But definitely, I think similarly to you, it's all about sort of when I was young. I think when you're 14, 15 and the sort of hormones are flying, I think you get very passionate about things. So certainly we got similar journeys in that side. But I think, and I also haven't seen really a politician at all, or a political party that really resonated with me like Plaid has before. But I was going to ask you about your favourite sort of politician or political figure ever. It doesn't have to be Plaid, but I was just wondering.
I'll be honest, I always consider myself a bit more of an activist before a political person. So if I'm okay to go, I'm more inclined towards political activists more than diehard politicians. But there's a few people, and maybe more movements, I think I'm a bit more inspired by, I think Cymdeithas Iaith was, to me, it was one of those things. It just made sense. It made sense. And, Cymdeithas Iaith, a lot of Plaid Cymru politicians have started in Cymdeithas Iaith.
Sorry, do you want to explain just a bit what Cymdeithas Iaith is, if people aren't...
So Cymdeithas Iaith is the Welsh Language Society, and it was started in 1962 on the back of Saunders Lewis, who was the founder of Plaid Cymru, doing a speech called Tyniad Iaith, the Fate of the Language, where he said, basically, if action isn't taken now, well, what would be the fate of the language? What will happen to our language? And it inspired so many young people across Wales, especially in universities. And the first protest happened, Ystydd leading the way on Pontryfechan, and demanded Welsh language rights and for the Welsh language to be considered an official language. And it was a long battle, but it eventually happened. And, the battle for the language is still happening, but it's fantastic. I have so much respect for people who've campaigned with Cymdeithas Iaith, gone to prison for the language, campaigns, I think very inspirational. But to think politician-wise, I think there's a few different politicians, some of them whose parties I really don't agree with, but as individuals who stand up for what they believe in, there's quite a few I'm inspired by, who are non-Plaid people.
And I think your point about earlier on as well about the language, I know it's a bit of a tangent, but we don't have to stick too strictly. I just wanted to bring that up, go back to it, because I think for a lot of people, the language is a very, very important part of Plaid Cymru. And I think obviously there's been strides made recently, and I think maybe it's a bit less prevalent of an issue. But for me, I think that was a massive part of when I was younger. I went to a Welsh medium school, Ysgol Strada, shout out, in Llanelli. And I think learning about Welsh history, sort of either through Welsh literature or in history class, is like a massive part of sort of creating the environment where we understand what Wales goes through today, but also what Welsh culture is and what the nation of Wales really is. And I learned recently that a lot of people, a lot of like young people in Wales, or maybe a couple years older than us, didn't actually have a very comprehensive historical education about Wales. And I think that's something that we should look towards maybe for the future, because I really think, understanding things like, I really enjoyed my lessons about Merched Beca or, Brad y Llyfrau Gleision, the treachery of the Blue Books, the Act of Union laws. I think those were really formative in my understanding of Wales as a place. And I'm wondering if you remember any of those. Did you have any of those history classes, or did you have to do it on your own sort of thing, learn about that?
Welsh history being taught in schools is a very complex. I very much respected three teachers I've had in school. I won't name them, obviously, but you know who you are. I've got a lot of respect for you. And who, the curriculum was very focused on 1066. I mean, I didn't do history as a GCSE, but even from my understanding, I think GCSE is still very English-centric, British-centric history. I don't remember much of it being taught to me. I remember us briefly having a lesson about... I don't even think it was about Llywelyn ap Gruffudd. I think it was about Llywelyn Fawr. But I don't think that was necessarily the choice of the teachers. I think the curriculum changes to it now. But for example, my school was renamed after Henry Richard, the Apostle of Peace. And in the middle of Tregaron, there's a big statue for him. And very, very fantastic man, very ahead of his time, wanted to abolish slavery, was anti-war. I'm sure he'd be very upset by the state of the world today. But our school was renamed after him.
Aren't we all upset by the state of the world?
But you're telling me. Love wins the day, boys. But we had like one sort of, assembly about him. And I mean, I already knew about Henry Richard, but that's all I remember ever being told about him. You know what I mean? I don't remember ever having lessons on him. And I might be wrong, but I don't remember it happening. But I was lucky. I grew up, my mum would tell me, Tryweryn, Llywelyn, all of this stuff that had gone down. So I suppose I was quite lucky because I was exposed to it when I was little because, well, Mum knew the importance that we knew what had gone down, but I understand that everybody has that through no fault of their own in it. But history is, I think, if more people understood Welsh history, things would be a bit different.
Yeah, 100%. I just think it was really important for me. I think it's just a very stark memory in my head, like learning about the different aspects of it. But I should answer my favorite non-Plaid politician, I think. When I was younger, I would have said some sort of niche Marxist from years ago, but I think I'm past that now. I think it might be a bit boring. I have two, probably. Internationally, at the moment, I say probably Zoran Mandani. I think that's quite an easy answer, isn't it? I was a big fan of his campaign. I think it's just amazing to show how grassroots, community organised politics can actually, with proper messaging and with great implementable policies, showed that sort of left-wing politics that hasn't got big donors can defeat sort of, the billionaire class. And I think it was really inspiring. And I also think that as he's come in to the mayor role, he's actually implemented what he said he's going to do. On like the first sort of 6 days, he sorted out his free childcare immediately. And I think that's something I hope we would see from sort of a Plaid-led government, is like instant wins, instant action, and doing what we've promised to do. Because if you do that, it's hard not to be successful, And I just admire that because he's actually stuck to his word thus far. And his words were great. So how could you not love him, really? And then secondly, although he was a Labour politician, which, I've got my thoughts about. When I was living in London, I went to see Michael Sheen's play about Nye Bevan. And I think that really, it did very much inspire me. And I think, I don't want to step on anything here because I don't know all that much about Nye Bevan's life outside of the play. And I don't think it would have showed bad stuff. So if he is cancelled, then I apologise. But obviously the formation of the NHS was huge. And I love how he was quite a radical within the Labour Party. He wanted everything to be done properly. He scrutinised everything. He had some questionable thoughts about, in the Second World War, about disarmament or whatever. But apart from that, I think he was great. And I love the fact that he was a Welsh boy. And I love the fact that he sort of embraced his mining roots. Yeah, for me, it's definitely Nye Bevan in the past. As long as he was a good boy, I don't really know too much about his personal life.
We don't want to get cancelled on the first episode, do we? But I'm sure.
No, that's what I really avoiding. I'm trying to avoid that.
I suppose it comes back to, it's very easy in politics to sort of get caught up. But at the end of the day, all these politicians are people, and everybody who goes into politics, at least they should be going into politics because they really want to better the lives of the people around them. And I think, despite what we might have to say about certain parties, I think we've got to remember that, I mean, not everyone, I won't name certain individuals, but I'm sure you know who I'm thinking of, do have good intentions. Whether they deliver on them, you know, it's like David Wigley said in his broadcast in 1972, I think it was, that the benefit of being a Plaid Cymru MP is you're not you don't have to be held to the whips in London because we're a Welsh-based party. So you might have these Labour, Lib Dem, even Conservative people who go into politics, but ultimately they might not always be able to deliver what they want to deliver for their people because they're being held to account by the whips in London and what goes on in Westminster. And as we know, Westminster doesn't care about Wales, and it never has.
That's a big thing that I think people I think it resonates with a lot of people, the fact that, Plaid are the only Welsh party actually centred in Wales and sort of headquartered in Wales. And to me, that's like a big reason sort of why they're the natural option for government in Wales, because they're not, they don't answer to sort of their puppet masters in London, unlike most other parties. And also going back to what you said about sort of trying not to be tribal. I mean, that is what Plaid Cymru does. And I think we've been criticised a little bit unfairly by a lot of parties for sort of working with Labour in the Senedd on sort of the cooperation agreement or with the budget this year. And the thing is that I personally think that just shows what Plaid's concerns and what Plaid's priorities are. It's not about sort of getting easy wins or playing politics, really. It's about trying to actually get the nation working. I mean, if the budget wasn't passed, there'd be no governmental funding for anything, right? Someone had to do it. And I think that Plaid stepped up. I think it actually showed maturity. So the fact that they work with Labour in that sense, to me, it's actually a positive, because I think that's more parties should be doing it. I think we get a lot more done, right?
As like I was saying earlier, we're here for the people, not for ourselves. Politicians aren't meant to be there for themselves, they're meant to be there for the people. And if that means having to work with other parties who you may not necessarily agree on everything, what we should all be in agreement is that we are here for the people, and the cooperation agreement, I didn't necessarily agree with it, and I still have mixed opinions on it, but I think it was established for the right reasons, was to deliver. Well, one of the biggest ones that came out of it was free school meals for children, that is, going back, was another thing, was one of the huge things that brought me to Plaid Cymru was, I could not, well, I could and I couldn't believe the extent of child poverty in Wales. It was nuts. And I remember how committed the 2021 election was. The Senedd campaign was on reducing child poverty, and going into this one now, we've got the canal payment. So good things did come out of the cooperation agreement, but this accusation that we're in a secret cabal with each other, I don't think, well, it isn't true, but,
No, no, exactly. And I think as well, I mean, as we're the Plaid Ifanc podcast, it would be remiss to not mention the fact that, for example, the free school meals for children and eliminating child poverty is something for young people. And I think Plaid's offering for young people is sort of a rarity within wider British politics and Welsh politics generally. And I think, you're right about the child poverty thing. I mean, I think the Bevan Institute said by 2030, it's almost about 39% of children in Wales will be living in poverty. For a developed nation, it's completely unacceptable. I think it really shows that the change of leadership is needed, considering Plaid are the only party with any policies targeted towards young people at the moment. That should be something that young people and families should look towards, and it's probably one of the main issues in Wales at the moment. I mean, my main issue personally is sort of towards young people and child poverty, the next generation, because we're all going to be sort of the future of the country, and I think that's what's important. So if we said sort of our favourite Plaid policy at the moment, I think mine would probably be the canal payments. I don't know about you. Maybe we could, until the manifesto comes out, we only have a few to choose from.
I'm looking forward. Yes. I mean, it's the canal payment for me at the moment, because that's one of the things I know they obviously committed and said we'll be delivering on. But very excited to see what's in the manifesto. I'm sure it will, the intention of the manifesto will be to deliver for the people of Wales. So it'll be interesting to see what's in there. I'm sure there'll be many policies in there we'll both agree with.
Yes, exactly. And actually a good part, a little insight into Plaid Ifanc, a good part of sort of Plaid's procedure, I think, going into this is that we have been consulted uh, on it by on Plaid on youth issues. They came to us directly and asked us to say what we think should be done and what our concerns are. And I think A, that's very democratic, but B, it's really nice to have a party that actually takes the concerns and inputs of young people seriously. Because I think it's hard sometimes being an active political young person, because it can feel as if people don't really take your thoughts seriously. You know, people, these kids these days, they don't bloody haven't worked a hard day in their lives, you know. And I just think being actually part of the process is integral. I mean, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, as they say. I don't know whose quote that is.
I've
Maybe
never
it's
heard
mine.
that before, but I love it.
Oh, maybe it is mine. No, I don't think it is.
That was fantastic. We all got together. We all have, because that's the thing, this is what I actually really love about Plaid Cymru is everybody's voice really does matter. You do have an influence you have on policy, on, the offer that we had to come together and put policies forward. And, I was in, the things that were important to me, I got to put forward and we were able to discuss them. And then we had other people put things forward I'd never even considered, things like some people, I won't go into too much detail, but things regarding the arts and stuff, which is very important to young people. It was very young people focused, and the fact that we had that say, I think, does speak a lot about Plaid Cymru. And as well, it didn't feel like a novelty. It didn't feel like, come on, have your say. It really felt like, okay, we're actually listening to you. We're taking some of this on board. Other things we might not be taking on board, not because we don't agree with it, but because it might not be realistic to implement now, but definitely something to consider. That's the thing. In Plaid, I feel like young people aren't viewed as a novelty. We are taken seriously, and I think that's something you might not see so often in other political parties. I think it's like,
No.
you do as you're told, but of course we're a bit rebellious, aren't we? But
I mean, they've let us have a podcast, so
what were they thinking?
yeah, I mean, we're trying to sort of represent it well. But I will disclaimer by saying that, like, we're not official Plaid Cymru representatives, so anything we say, is Plaid Cymru are not responsible for the words or the things that we say. We take all views expressed are our own.
Yes.
Unless we say otherwise. But yeah, no, as you were saying, it didn't feel like a checkbox exercise. And listen, we haven't seen the manifesto yet, so perhaps it will transpire that there's just nothing for young people in it. But I do highly doubt that. I mean, I've had plenty of interactions with Plaid politicians from, in canvassing sessions and in conferences, as I'm sure you have as well. And they're always eager to listen. They're also always eager to sort of partake in Plaid Ifanc things. I mean, we're going to be hosting Q&As within Plaid Ifanc with sort of candidates moving forward. And hopefully we'll have a couple guests on this show in the future. And those are the sort of opportunities that you get within Plaid Cymru. And I'll tell you, it feels like a proper, as you said earlier, a proper family, but also a place where you can also see yourself like improving or developing as a person, because in those sessions, as you said, I won't go into too much detail either, but people were speaking about, prisons, people speaking about, as you said, the arts, people speaking about healthcare, people speaking about sort of women's issues, disability issues, queer issues. And I think a lot of those things, they're quite sort of, you kind of consider them, but you don't go into like the depth of it, or you don't have your own perfect thoughts aligned on them yet. And so listening to other people about it really gave me more of an insight into sort of how we can go about tackling these things. And I think that only comes from speaking to each other, and that's what the Plaid Ifanc community tries to achieve, I think. I really enjoyed that, and I would encourage, of course, anyone to listen to join Plaid Ifanc.
We're a right laugh, we are.
I think we will discuss a bit more about what's been going on in politics this week. It might be a little bit more interesting than sort of us having our little sort of introduction. So what did you want to speak about first then? I think there's been a lot going on in Wales this week.
Shall we start with, seeing as I'm up here in Bangor, shall we start with, so I don't know if any of you have seen the news, but there's a debating society in Bangor University who had an offer from, I can't remember, Sarah Pochin, is it, I think she's called?
And someone, Mr. Anderton, a young reformed.
And they requested to do a question and answer here in Bangor, and the a question and answer session, and the society turned them down and said, we don't want a platform reform, which I honestly have mixed opinions on, because like we were talking about earlier, you need to talk with people to understand issues and you need to have healthy debate. Unfortunately, Reform don't like to have healthy debate. They like to shout the loudest and lie and mislead. And this is a legitimate debating society. And why would you want to entertain nonsense? You know what I mean? It's a difficult one, because obviously they're now utilizing this to say, everybody's gone woke. All the universities, the inmates have taken over.
Cultural Marxism.
I know. But it's interesting though, because the Debate Society have had, I don't want to say woke versus non-woke discussions, but I can't, for the reformers out there, there have been discussions that are maybe a bit sort of touchy, a bit sort of,
Controversial.
Yeah, controversial, that's the word. There's been debates on things like abortion, there's been debates on gay marriage, there's been debates on trans issues, all sorts of controversial takes, and they've been debated out respectfully by all sides. So this accusation that the society is just woke, everybody's agreeing with each other, isn't true. Maybe reform. Well, I don't know. What do you feel? Before I go off on a tangent.
Yeah, that's what we tend to do. So we're lucky, when we're not recording these podcasts, our conversations are sort of like just very tangential all the time. But I think if I just take in two halves, if I speak about sort of the decision by the society first and then the reaction, I think the decision itself, my thoughts on it are sort of, I don't know, John Stuart Mill, free speech advocate in the past, said, I think a very convincing argument where he said we should sort of allow free speech as much as possible because it fosters debate. And I think, if you think that your side or your opinions are so strong, then in a debate, it's the perfect opportunity to sort of display to everyone else sort of how you're right and everyone and your interlocutor is wrong. And I think that is really important. I think especially in universities. However, the thing is that there's a difference between the university and a society, right? The university itself, I think, would have no grounds, in my opinion, no justification to ban a reform society, because taking emotion out of it, reform do exist. They're a party that will be a party for the foreseeable future. People will vote for them. Banning them from sort of congregating isn't going to stop that from happening. It's probably just going to push people away from your side. But the society itself is independent of the university. And the society itself can make its own sovereign decisions. I mean, you can't really tell society to do something if it doesn't want to. It's a completely ridiculous thing to say. And the thing is, as well, you have societies and universities. When I was in King's in London, there was a KCL Labour Society, KCL Green Society, KCL Tory Society, KCL Reform Society, KCL Lib Dem Society. You have societies from all parties across the spectrum in universities. So, and they're not representative of the university, because there's you can't say, the university supports Labour because there's a Labour Society, And I think that's where the difference is. If I was the debating society, I'd probably tell them, come in because we think we're gonna prove you wrong. But also I can see why it could make students uncomfortable, or they don't want to give that platform. So yeah, I think really I would rather them have said come along, but I can see where they're coming from. And my issue is mainly where reform come in at with what did they do again? They threatened to defund Bang University, which is very Trumpian, I think.
Yeah, yes, that is very Trumpian, isn't it? It's very, but we're the snowflakes. We're the snowflakes.
Yeah.
It's actually insane, the threat that was made by Zia Youssef to defend the most Welsh language orientated university in the world, to defund it, to essentially try to shut it down. When people show you their colours, listen. We know where reforms stand on the Welsh language. They may not say the quiet bit out loud, but we see it. I would have loved for Sarah Bolchin and whoever else to come into our university. I would have loved to have debated with them. But the threat that was made is actually ridiculous. And it goes to show, if these people got into power, how quickly they'd abuse it. How quickly they would abuse their power, exactly the same as Trump cutting funding to states who don't agree with him, cutting funding to sciences and all of this different stuff. Do we really want that in our
Exactly.
country?
And I think as well, Jack, for example, if I say I requested, I'm going to request to come to your house, all right, and you say no, and then I say, all right, then, do you know what? I'm actually going to just knock your house down like the big bad wolf. You'd be a bit confused because I made a request, right? What I'm confused about personally with reform here is that they seem to think that they actually made a demand, and that Bangor University Society. Debating Society has no free will, that they have to say yes to reform. I think it is a little bit sort of it's like a petulant child from Zia Youssef. I really do think so. I mean, how spoiled can you be? Do you expect, if you're going to send in a request, you have to accept that the answer might be yes or no?
This is something else I think we need to keep in mind with the decision that was made is they don't want a debate. They don't want healthy debates. Actually, the request made by Reform was not a debate. It was a question and answer session. And I think that's something really important to differentiate Reform. It was an opportunity by Reform to platform their ideas and to push their agenda, which, okay, to an extent, everybody has the right to do. But again, the university, well, not the university decision. It was a decision of a group who come under the student union have the right to turn down. But this is something I think I spoke with Esbyrrec earlier about this. I said, well, Reform are going on about how Plaid Cymru got thrashed in the by-election that happened in Caergybi and Holyhead on Anglesey. Apparently, this is an omen for Plaid Cymru, even though the polls say otherwise. But anyway, why not champion local reform candidates? Why not have actual local people who understand the area to come in and speak with us? I think that would have been better received. Then you have to remember they don't have any candidates yet. They don't have any candidates. I mean, it might have something to do with the fact that for you to even put an application in, you have to pay to be an applicant.
£50, I believe. It is, yeah. Well, it was that for the Gordon and Denton by-election that's going on at the moment.
Well, that's crazy. Why not champion them? Oh, because you don't have any candidates. And maybe because you actually don't respect the area you're parachuting yourselves into. Because let's be real, Reform don't care about Wales. They'll make out that they do. We only have to look at Caerphilly. Look, Caerphilly, we love you. We know you want us. Caerphilly's had enough. We're going to get voted in. And then they lost. And then all of a sudden, you've got all of these Reform councillors and politicians and supporters going, typical Welsh, they're a bit thick, they're a bit there. That's how much Reform care about you. We're being used. And, if they believed in the people of, well, Bangor, Aberconwy, Mourne is the constituency Bangor University is under, why not put their candidates forward?
I think that's a really great point, actually, because when you think about it, the new CNEV rules say that you can only stand if you are a resident or you're from Wales. Sarah Porchin is already an MP in Runcorn and Helsby, and this Mr. Anderson, I think Jack Anderson, he's not Welsh, right? So realistically, what is really the point of Bangor Debating Society saying yes to this request? Because it's I do see how it would literally sort of just be like a canvassing session for these two people who you cannot even vote for in Bangor. I think it's unjustified to be so annoyed about it, and I think it's so worrying that they've claimed that if this happened and Reform were in government that they would like dock funding from Bangor. It's very weird to suggest that you would like remove funding from people just because they rejected a request from you. And also something interesting that I found was that Zia Youssef put out a tweet later on saying how like there's a free speech in universities bill or something in England. And he said, somehow this doesn't apply to Wales. How ridiculous is that? And then he blamed the Tories for it. He's the head of policy for reform, right? And clearly he hasn't quite got a grasp of how devolution works, because education is devolved. So I'm not sure why we should be, expected to want to engage with a head of policy or anyone from Reform UK who doesn't even know about devolution. My last thing on this topic is that, okay, maybe I would have said for them to come in, and I think it would have been a good opportunity to engage them. But, when we think about Sarah Porchin and we think about what she is quite infamous for, it is, at the end of the day, going on live television in the weeks after she was elected and saying she's sick to death of seeing black and brown people on adverts on television, which, is a ridiculous statement. I'm not going to go into it myself. I think that is one of the most outrageous statements to make ever. She was complaining about how it doesn't reflect Britain and that there's too much diversity on the screen, and then saying, that Britain itself is too diverse. So it's almost like it does actually reflect the diversity of Britain. So it's very confusing, and I can see why. If you have black and brown students in Bangor University in the debating society, why should they be subjected to interacting with someone who's been on live television telling them that they don't deserve to, have representation?
But they'll take your votes, though. You know what I mean? I giggled there because I thought you were going to talk about, I think it was Sarah, I can't, Pochin, is it? I think her name was, who sang God Save the Queen. Was it?
No, no, I think that was Andrea Jenkins, who also sang her.
My mistake. That was a false giggle.
Her brilliant original track, Somnia, which is available on all streaming platforms if you would like to hurt your ears. But yeah, exactly. So I stand with Bangor University Debating Society, and I think it really shows, as you said, the true colours of reform. Unless you have anything else to say on this topic, I think we can move on to maybe what's been going on down in Westminster, and specifically about Eluned Morgan and her sort of refusal to call out Keir Starmer's decision on the now notorious Peter Mandelson.
It's been a hell of a week.
For those who don't know, I'll be very careful here, but Peter Mandelson he was a member of New Labour in the Blair government, and he was brought in by Starmer to be the US ambassador because he was so friendly with Donald Trump. But basically, Peter Mandelson had very, very close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and Keir Starmer seemed to be fully aware of this friendship before he hired Mandelson. And so Anna Sawa of the Scottish Labour Party called for Starmer to resign. Morgan McSweeney, his chief of staff, resigned. There's been big resignations, big calls for Starmer's to go. And Eluned Morgan decided today that she stands by Keir Starmer. So what do we make of that?
It's almost, Eluned doesn't want to rock the boat. Eluned doesn't want to rock the boat. And, Labour in Wales are trying to make out that we can still win this. You're not winning this election, I'm sorry. And I think the biggest problem that's happened with Labour in Wales is they've been so loyal to, the London sort of aspect of Labour that they've forgotten they're actually Welsh Labour. And this would have been if Eluned and the Welsh Government in general have started to try and take away challenging Westminster, because they led on this whole, once they get in back in 2024 in the general election, that there was going to be this fantastic relationship between the English government and the Welsh government, and Wales is just, oh my God, it's going to be like living in the year 3000. Yeah, they're going to be like floating cars. Obviously, I'm exaggerating here. Don't sue me. And none of it was executed. We just got completely ignored. We saw it with the Crown Estate. We saw it with all sorts, HS2, Jo Stevens, I know she's a member of the Senedd, but was so in favour of returning HS2. And now they're a government, they don't want to know about it. And I think the problem the Welsh Labour had was they didn't distance themselves quickly enough from Labour in Westminster. And this could have been the last opportunity maybe for Welsh Labour and Eluned Morgan to go, actually, we are different from Labour in Westminster. We might be the same party, but we see things differently, and we've got a moral compass and a backbone. And unfortunately, as harsh as that statement I just made might sound, they've not enacted on it. And I honestly think that was the last chance they had. They've put out this, what's it, the Red Welsh Labour Way or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Red Welsh Way.
Where is it? I don't see it. There was a perfect opportunity here, and Eluned Morgan just decided to stay faithful to Labour in England. And it's a shame, actually, because, doing the right thing is the one thing. But I know, I won't name names, but I, believe it or not, as much as I do dislike the Labour Party, I'm friends with a lot of Labour members and, people who act.
It's the same party, Plaid Cymru and Labour.
I know. We're all
best friends.
Yes, we all meet up in cloaks and things. But if there was an episode of The Traitors, Joe Stephen would be on it. But I've forgotten where I'm going with this, but yeah, it just seems like she's completely missed her chance here to actually differentiate. Labour in Scotland have done it.
Yeah.
I think as well it's those too scared again to rock the boat, too scared to try, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I just don't have much to add. I think it's just so emblematic of what you were saying about this red Welsh way. We haven't seen it. We are, though, seeing this sort of partnership in power now, but it's more so, I think, just sort of a blind dedication from Eluned Morgan to Keir Starmer. I think, for me, it's pretty cut and dry that Keir Starmer should resign. I mean, that is the position, I believe, of Rhys Iorwerth and Eluned Morgan, and not Eluned Morgan, of Lleisiau Roberts. And at the end of the day, Eluned Morgan doesn't. I feel bad for her because I know really there wasn't many people within Welsh Labour that wanted the job, and it is a tough job to have. But I think this was a kind of an open goal for her. Anasawa in Scotland took that opportunity and ran with it. I don't see why Eluned Morgan wouldn't do that. I think she's very much sort of. It just proves how entwined the two Labour parties are, and it really just drives home what we were speaking about earlier. How Plaid Cymru, we don't have masters in London. We are our own people, and that gives you free judgment over what goes on because we're not clouded by the sort of whips land in Westminster. Whereas Eluned Morgan has made what seems to be a business decision. She doesn't want to be sort of at the behest of Keir Starmer. And now, it just looks like she's sort of blindly attached to them. And I think it just shows that there's a little bit of cowardice. I mean, what it shows to me, at least anyway, is that it's almost like they're giving up now. You're the first minister of the country. Have a bit of gumption and think, okay, I'm going to show how me and my government are different from the British Labour government. I mean, when you go out canvassing, people are furious with Labour, largely because of what's going on in Westminster. If you could say, listen, I've just called for the Prime Minister's resignation, you'd be able to go out on the doorsteps and say, listen, you should judge us based on our actions and not their actions. Now, you look like, two peas in a pod. It's, I can't get my head around it. And I think, Plaid have done the right thing, obviously, by saying serious questions need to be asked about Keir Starmer's judgment. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous.
Well, I suppose it's a question of, but when we film our next podcast, hopefully next week, will we still have Keir Starmer as a Prime Minister? Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
They were meant to offer this stability that the Conservatives didn't offer. But we've seen that instability already in the Welsh Labour government. We went from Mark Drakeford to Vaughan Gething to Eluned. And, part of me does feel a bit not sorry, maybe that's the wrong word, but I think Eluned Morgan has got this impossible decision. But had she just condemned Keir Starmer and maybe earlier on in her career as First Minister started to question the Westminster government, maybe Labour wouldn't be ranking at 10% in the polls. After the most successful political party in the world, which they are. Wales has overturned a Labour majority every single year since time immemorial, it feels like. I don't know, it's kind of, I don't want to say sad, but it's just to see that this is how it's fallen apart. And this is what I was going to say before I forgot what I was mentioning earlier. I am sort of friends with people who are Labour members. I try and convince them to come to the good side, but they feel so disappointed. They feel so let down and disappointed by this most recent decision. And I can't blame them.
No, I mean, it's just to me, it's mind blowing. I mean, it was real sort of clear opportunity for me for Eluned Morgan to differentiate herself, but also to make sort of a judgment that the people of Wales would back. I don't know a soul in Wales that's a fan of Keir Starmer. I've never thought that he's necessarily some evil tyrant or whatever, but I think there's serious issues that have been raised here now. And I don't know anyone who is in support of him. And I think really, if you were really representing Wales as a nation, you'd put your neck on the line and say, okay, Mr. Starmer, you can think of what you want of me, but this is what I think of you. And she didn't do it, unfortunately. And I think that's it's a real disappointing thing. And as you said, next week we will have to keep an eye out on how this develops. Other than that, I don't really have much left to add. I think this is a very good introduction to the Plaid Ifanc podcast. If you have any parting remarks other than what we've been speaking about, I think think it's a good place to leave it there.
Yeah, and that's all I have to say is, well, obviously, and join Plaid Cymru, and get involved in Plaid Ifanc. Plaid Ifanc's great, yeah.
Yes.
You know, come join us. It's free as long as you're already paying membership for Plaid Cymru. Yeah, join Plaid Ifanc. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Don't know if we've spoken much sense, but I think we've
Well,
done
we
all
hope
right.
we have. Follow the Plaid Ifanc socials as well. Me and Jack are very much active on both of them in the future. We're hoping it won't just be us two every single time. And yeah, this should be going out at some point in the next week, but it will be advertised on the Plaid Ifanc socials, I hope. And there should be a Welsh version as well, hopefully, if we get some time to record one. So
Yes,
yeah, if that's all for today, I'm happy
that's
to
all.
leave it there. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Jack. I shall be seeing you soon.
Yes.
And hope you guys enjoyed. All
Right,
right.
diolch yn fawr, everyone. Ta-da!
Ta-ra.